Customers want fast and frictionless digital experiences, yet also expect protection against breaches, privacy violations, and fraud. Drive engagement by optimizing security and convenience to attract and retain customers. Use the pwning cloud platform to build, test, and optimize digital experiences. The no-code orchestration engine weaves together authentication, user management, and MFA, all of which can enhance security, drive engagement, and boost revenues. Visit securityweekly.com/ping identity to learn more.
Attacks can't be prevented, but they can be stopped. Modern cyber attackers have already made it inside your network, but you have the upper hand. Find and eradicate threats with ExtraHop network detection and response, and shut them out before real damage is done. Learn the advanced techniques attackers are using and how ExtraHop stops them with a live attack simulation. Register at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. That's extra HOP.
And welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Just a few announcements before we dive into the news. Security Weekly listeners save 20% on InfoSec World 2022 passes. InfoSec World will be held September 27th through the 29th at Disney's Coronado Springs Resort in Lake Buena Vista in Florida. Visit securityweekly.com/ISW and use the code ISW22-SecWeek20 to secure your spot. Really rolls off the tongue. Don't miss any of your favorite Security Weekly content. Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to any of our podcast feeds and have all new episodes downloaded right to your phone. You can also join our mailing list, Discord server, and follow us on social media and our streaming platforms. So, as we mentioned earlier, there was a lot more layoff announcements than there was funding announcements, which is an interesting contrast there, in my opinion. We saw layoffs from NSO that laid off 100 employees and the CEO stepped down. Malwarebytes laid off 125 more employees. I'm pretty sure they laid off a few hundred earlier in the year. And Okta lays off their entire U.S. sourcing team. So, I mean, what is there anything to make of this? Is there more to come? Do you think that it's dying down for the year at least?
I think this is just the beginning, right? Like we've seen the valuation start to normalize and get back to a much more realistic expectation and set of numbers, as well as we started to see the VCs that are buying, they're leveraging their buying power now and getting a better deal. So we'll see acquisitions happening at the right price for many companies that may not have the runway they need. And thus, once that M&A starts to fold in, we're going to see some of those layoffs. The Okta one is kind of an interesting one, but the other ones I think are pretty within side of normal ranges.
Yeah, you're spot on, T. The days of actually having a company that you can just run infinite burn on and know that money is free and you'll forever get all the additional money you need to hold the highest number of people possible to execute as fast as possible, those days are gone. We're seeing companies now be managed towards an expectations of profitability, an expectation of healthy growth and not burn at any cost. And to do that, you have to lower your costs, right? And in software, what are your two biggest costs? Your two biggest costs are your probably cloud bill or whatever, wherever you're running the physical software itself, and by far your human capital. So it's a natural fit for companies trying to learn how to become healthy and to drive towards profits to do layoffs and lots of them. So as the macroeconomic conditions continue to decline or even hold steady, we will continue to see layoffs around high-tech companies. And security is no different. We're part of any other high-tech fold.
You'll also see a shift in... Oh, sorry, Katie.
Sorry. I think we're at the beginning, like Tyler One said. I think we've got... Sorry, you make it hard, guys. I think we're at the beginning. I think 2023 is going to be a kind of hard year. I know we're just starting, I'm looking at my calendar over here, just starting the end of 2022, but I think there's going to be a lot more layoffs, not just in the security, not just in the tech sector, but everything was really good for a while, and we have to have that evening out. And we're seeing signs of things in other sectors too. Usually the housing market is the first one to indicate problems. And it was holding steady for a bit, but even the housing market now is starting to go down. And so I think we better buckle up, and companies, hopefully too many people, the worker bees won't get hit too much in this recession, but it's going to happen.
You'll also see a shift in, I was going to say, you're going to see a shift in leadership as well, right? Like we see, like Tyler was saying, the companies have to get to a healthier state. They have to actually have some fiscal responsibility. They have to start turning profits and doing good business. And so the amount of leaders out there that are capable of doing that, and or the evidence of what good business looks like, is going to become more apparent. And those shifts will start to see bigger changes across the leadership boards and the executive boards, and maybe even the advisory boards from that standpoint. VCs will either end up acquiring or moving on and shift advisors in and out because of the new strategies that have to be approached in this different market.
Yeah, Katie brought up the mortgage market, and I recently was at a large mortgage broker in the Midwest, and I mean, all year was just round after round of layoffs, and unfortunately, it touched the security team in a very big way. But it's, I think personally, I think that it'll die down until the start of next year, and then it's just going to pick right back up, and probably even be, a lot more companies that are laying people off and getting acquired and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, on the bright side, when we're talking about the impact on technology, software style companies like ours, when it comes to macroeconomics, we tend to be the leaders in being hit by those impacts. Meaning, when the money's free, because we as a like a group of companies, we like to burn the money fast, burn hard, grow fast. Those types of like massive growth styles, those are the ones that get crushed early. But then they're also the ones that come back the earliest, right? Because once the money does start to free up and flow again, that's where those investments end up landing, in the high risk, high reward category, which most of the software startups that we're talking about are a piece of.
Yeah, it makes sense. So one acquisition to note is Krit has been acquired by GreyNoise Intelligence, which, I mean, it's interesting. I kind of skimmed the article. From what it sounded like to me, just my opinion, it sounded like the owners or the higher ups at Krit were just kind of burnt out, honestly, and needed to kind of get out of it and just take a step away. I don't know. Did anyone else have a different reaction or thought to that article?
Yeah, it's my reaction or thought is almost identical. I actually met the Krit guys, gosh, it's got to be going on 8-10 years ago now, when they were just starting. They were working with GreyNoise. It was in the ideation phase of GreyNoise. I think GreyNoise is 5 years old today, actually. I remember seeing on Andrew's, may not be today, but within this week, that GreyNoise is 5 years old. So it must have been about 6 years ago, 5-6 years ago. I remember meeting Krit for a company that I was trying to put together at the recommendation of Andrew from the founder of GreyNoise. And, they were primarily focused on UI, UX, web-based experiences for cybersecurity companies. And that is a services company. And a services company, you work and you work and you work. And it's a grind. And they built a wonderful reputation as a great UI, UX style company. But at some point, you just want to be done with it. And an acqui-hire makes a natural exit for them, which is what this really is, right? It's like, look, you guys have been doing this for GreyNoise for 5 years now. You've killed it for them. Let's just bring you on full time, take you out of the grind of constantly trying to find new customers, and let you become the the front end team at GreyNoise. And from my limited understanding, I haven't talked to Andrew about it, but from my limited understanding, that's likely what happened here.
Yep, it provides a huge value to GreyNoise. It's one of the kind of missing key pieces to make it, like, everyone loves GreyNoise. The product's amazing. The data's amazing. Andrew's amazing. The UX UI portion of being very polished and taking it out of just the analyst view and the hardcore log nerds, and really putting it to anybody that wants to get some visualization, be able to use it for executive briefing, be able to use it in incidents on a dashboard, all the things that are necessary to kind of make that next evolution. It was the right move, and it was a great company to do it with. Andrew knew what he was doing there, and I think it was a good strategy move for both sides of that, because you're right, it does take the pressure off of a very heavily focused and ongoing work from a service provider that is providing a very niche service to a very niche population anyway. That's a hard grind from a startup standpoint. So it just puts them into a position where they can do what they like, still have a great product, and do it with a company that's actually doing good stuff.
Yeah, and I think the cybersecurity startup community can take a lesson from GreyNoise on this. I think there's a ton of lessons they can take from GreyNoise for what it's worth. I've known Andrew for a long time now, and he's done a great job building something in a very healthy way. But early on, he made the decision that UI UX was going to be a differentiating factor for their business. And I have an investment thesis personally that I think the vast majority, 80 to 90% of the cybersecurity markets that surround us from a point product perspective, could be completely disrupted, the leaders destroyed and taken out by someone who just is really good at UI UX. That's it. You have to have a product that's equivalent in quality, but beyond that, like, the biggest differentiator you can do, one of the biggest differentiators you can do in cyber today, is make it easy to use and make it quick time to value. And GreyNoise has done a great job of that from day one, and it's built on the back of Krit. So I think it's a cool acquisition.
Yeah, it sounds like it just kind of makes sense for them to do the acquisition. So the next article that I wanted to touch on was incident response in AWS being just so different. And I have some personal experience with this where, it's just, it's almost like you're learning incident response all over again, because AWS is just a totally different environment. You're using tools that have, totally different language associated with them and whatnot. How do you guys just get around this? How do you make this easier? What methods have you found that work best for you?
There is no good way around this. Let's be real. Like, AWS is not alone in this problem. I will call out all cloud and SaaS providers on this particular issue, like just dealing with O365, the changes in products, compliance, names, audit logs, how you get those. Same with AWS, where the trails end up, where the logs go, what apps integrate, how those actually generate logs, and you can obtain those. Like, there's no good way around this. All these SaaS applications really need to streamline, get to a formal way of collecting logs, and make it well documented and easy for the users to conduct these incidents, because I know this stuff and this is not easy, and my scripts have to change day to day in order to just work. So you end up relying on building your own tool or an open source tool in order to do this. Otherwise, you spend a ton of money buying a third-party integration that may or may not get all the artifacts that you need and may or may not provide, intelligence at the level you need. So this is a common problem with SaaS applications, and something that cloud providers and SaaS applications really need to get a handle on, since everything is already migrated there and we're in a pickle around providing good attribution, good logs, good incident response, and managing all those pieces.
Yeah, all three things need to be upgraded to do this well: technology, people, and processes. Primarily people, this is a whole new paradigm of learning how this stuff all works together, right? So they have to reinvent themselves, restudy from the ground up, learn how all this stuff works. Processes, any tool, quite frankly, that can lower the amount of time that it takes to do this type of effort would be massively adopted. But the processes around how to do it have significantly changed compared to the old days of IR. And so between the people and the processes, there's opportunity for significant tooling to make this better. And there are companies out there that indirectly are solving some of these problems, like some of the cyber asset attack surface management vendors like Katie and I work for at Axonius and Jupiter One offer some offerings around this. We're not IR platforms, but really the ability to know what you have, where it exists across the board from an asset vantage point, and the ability to query that and look it up literally for any asset in the cloud goes a long way to shortening the amount of time, making the processes easier, making the understanding easier. But at the end of the day, I think the biggest hurdle to this problem and getting it solved is people, getting people trained up in the new lexicon, the language, how things work, how they interoperate. What's the difference between guard duty and CloudTrail and security groups and IAM tokens? All of that stuff is super important to understanding how this works. And I think Chris Ferris's write-up here is absolutely fantastic. I recommend anybody looking to educate themselves in cloud IR or in general cloud security should consume this content.
Yeah, it is definitely a different paradigm.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Katie.
I was just going to say, I don't know the other providers as much. We work with AWS and I have at other companies too. And I was just at Reinforce, and the amount of information they're putting out is pretty dizzying, but they're putting some good effort behind it to make sure that the resources are there from a provider perspective. But yeah, you've got to have the people, and the people who have both the time and the skill to understand how to do it, because there's no one size fits all. There's no silver bullet. Nobody's going to implement this for you. It's a lot. I mean, I sat through a whole bunch of talks when I was at the conference. I guess it was just a couple of weeks ago at this point. And there's a lot of information out there, but it's also a lot to consume. And nobody's sitting around just waiting, to learn about this stuff or has all the hours in the day to just get a good education. It's already on top of a pretty busy schedule and heavy workload. So, I think AWS, and like I said, I'm sure the other, major providers are doing a good job too, but it's just a lot. And this space in particular is pretty tricky because it's only going to get bigger. Right. And I don't know if we're going to get other, quote, major providers in the space. Right now, we've got a small handful, but if that happens, none of these are going to be the same. So it's not like you can just be an expert in AWS. That's not.
I put a bunch of the onus. I put a lot of this onus on these cloud providers, these major cloud providers. They really do need to step up and simplify this for the end users to understand even what their technologies are, much less like the deployment and securing of them. Like, you could spend a month just reading on the basic deployment of an AWS instance with EC2 back and EBS block backed. You get into the security groups and the IAM rights. All those things really they make it overly complicated. Let's get down to the nuts and bolts of like how to deploy this simply, provide some security tools, put things underneath of the right names and easy to understand, intuitive places for your end user, and then get the pricing scales so that people can actually understand them. They don't end up with massive bills and have to migrate off and leave legacy stuff and stale data out there for hackers to go find. Like, this is why we have such a diverse and complex ecosystem right now, is because the vendors have made it such, and we have not done a good job to force them into doing a better job around what they're providing to us as consumers.
Right, because that's a competitive advantage for them if they have somebody who becomes an expert in their thing. But the reality is, from user point of view, very few companies are going to stick with one provider. So I agree. I think it would be great if there was some, consortium to come together. I don't see it happening. Do you?
I do not. We do not have enough leverage or pull, and we've already made the migration, and we've already paid their bills to get to the monopoly standpoint of where they're at. And between, only having 3 of them really, we're kind of locked in and tied into these services across each ecosystem and within every organization and enterprise. Now, you'll see almost all 3 of them, and if you don't, you're still integrating and having to tie to the different SaaS applications and services that are getting intermingled or acquired through M&A.
Which makes it even harder if there's a multi-cloud incident, right?
Yeah, multi-tenancy, multi-cloud makes it a horrible incident to have to respond to.
Yeah,
that's maybe when you shut the blinds and close the doors and just run away for a while. No, I'm kidding. Don't do that.
It gets really difficult when, on the security team side of it, right? Like, recently I I started a company a couple of years ago, and they told me, yeah, we're very heavy into AWS. I just asked them point blank, are we in Azure? Are we in GCP? All this stuff, right? And they said, no, we're all in AWS. 2 months into being at the company, I talked to the right developer, or maybe the wrong one for this case. And he told me, oh yeah, my team's been in Azure for 6 months. And we have a sizable deployment in Azure compared to AWS. Like, it's right up there with it. And sure enough, 2 months later, I find out that we're also in GCP just by talking to the right person at the right time, really in the right meeting with the people that have the different influence not there, and it creates this huge problem because now I have to learn what a VM is called in AWS, and then I need to figure out what it's called in Azure, and then I need to go into GCP and figure out what it's called, and then I need to learn all of these different security features, where they're actually at in the console, and hope that I can figure it all out within 24, 48 hours to actually get a good grasp on our environment. But we can move on from this topic. We've dug into this quite a bit. So let's see. Tyler Shields wanted to talk about product-led growth. So what is that? And why does it matter?
Oh my gosh, here we go.
Yeah, this is a loaded topic. So I tweeted last week, actually August 29th, might even been this week. I said, when did product-led growth become the must-have go-to-market model? There is no silver bullet. GTM, go-to-market, is about matching product sales, marketing, and the overall business against a specific GTM approach. Don't do product-led growth just to do product-led growth. Chances are it won't work, which I thought was a very salient comment. And then, Adrian Sanabria, the wonderful primary host of this show, replies, trends and fads, man, trends and fads. In the cases I've studied, product-led growth works really well for the right company, with the right product, with the right timing, with the right founders, with the right designers and engineers, and the right ICP. It's easy and super simple. And so I think what Adrian wanted to bring up was a discussion about the timing and the expectations of product-led growth, and how literally at least 3/4 of cybersecurity startups that I talked to today that are in the seed, pre-seed, ideation stages, before they've actually gotten to the point where they're selling a product, they're iterating on what product market fit could be. They're always immediately saying to me, yeah, and we're going to have product-led growth for our go-to-market. Everybody's going to come to us with a bottoms-up model. And I go, okay, tell me a little bit about your market. What's your average deal size? $75K a year. I'm like, wait, okay, first off, there's your first mistake, your first gap, right? And it's like, once you get into all the ways that you can blow up product-led growth, it's really hard to do. It is an extremely difficult thing to do. Now, everybody wants to do it because they see the SNCCs of the world, right? The ones that have figured out that perfect fit at the perfect timing with the perfect deal structure and became massive multi-billion-dollar companies because they got that right. The reality is PLG, as much as everybody wants to do it, it just doesn't work for the 90%. It just doesn't work. Anybody comment on that rant? I'll leave it open-ended.
I think, what we've seen through so much of the security community is that you have very technical people starting companies because they had a problem that they wanted to solve. They had an issue that they thought wasn't solved by another product. And so we have these very technical, product-oriented people starting companies. And they really believe, because if this product that they're building had been around when they were in the end user position, if they had this product that they were building at the time that they needed it, they would have bought it automatically. And so they assume that just, to build it and they will come. And there definitely is an inflection point at most companies, and it's really early on. It's earlier on than most technical CEOs think, that you don't just build a product and it will come. But there's almost a misbelief in the industry, and I've seen it time and time again, where very technical CEOs think that if we just have this great product, we're going to be fine. And they either understaff or they downplay any kind of marketing and, all kinds of sales. I've heard people, CEOs say, well, if you just say the right things, we shouldn't lose any deals. And I've heard this at multiple companies. They really believe that the product just sells itself. And I think that's a problem industry-wide.
That's the big issue right there, right? Is the big issue is many of these places that are doing this product-led growth and trying to build a strategy out of this. One, there's VCs that are pushing them to do some of this, and those VCs are ones that are also not very good with business acumen. Two, if the leadership is not great with business acumen, they're very technical but not people, or they don't understand people and consumers and how business actually works, then you run into many of the situations that you were talking about, as well as the product focus and not really understanding how to bring about the business, understanding the business development side of this, the business risk, speaking to the executives and getting the value add, all of the things that have made businesses successful and the longevity of those businesses successful, all those things end up missing, and you end up with a simple product company. And that never works for a long-term strategy, which leaves the consumer and end user either having a product that's been acquired or a product that goes under.
Yeah, so
I'll
if Gus is actually listening from the production side, you can throw up a spicy hot take symbol on this one, because I'll chuck one out there. If we take a second and talk about the VC incentives here. VC's not that one. That's not my hot take. There you go.
That's from last week.
The VCs are incented to do what? The VCs are incented to have multi-billion-dollar companies fast or bust. Right? They need to get massive returns. They're going to have one or two companies out of a dozen or 15 in their fund that return all of their results. And so PLG to them is a godsend. If they get the one or two that hit, they're golden. They've made their fund. They're off to raise another $400 million for fund two. So they want everybody to try it because it's a fail fast, massive reward or fail fast type of solution. And I think building a healthy company is a much harder proposition in today's macroeconomic thing as we approach, or macroeconomic situation, as we mentioned on previous discussions, a better way to build a business. And so my spicy hot take, quite frankly, is I think PLG as the go-to GTM will die in 2 to 3 years. It'll just fizzle out and burn out because people recognize and realize it doesn't make a healthy company usually. It makes a massive unicorn or a dead zombie and nothing in the middle. So my spicy hot take along the lines of what Adrian said is this is a fad. PLG is the latest hot fad everybody wants. It's gone in 2 to 3 years max.
And we should also point out that Adrian's probably going crazy in his car right now because he just slacked out to us, and this is a quote from Adrian. He's driving right now. PLG is kind of like going viral. It's nice if it happens. You can put some things into place to increase the chances of it happening, but you can't make, in caps, it happen.
Well, that's the formula thing, right? Like these VCs have a formula that they've been able to see work where they have a certain failure rate. They're able to determine what that failure and break rate is with the least lost capital. So their risk is able to be measured and be taken at a lower valuation in order to push forward and get those one or two to pop where they make enough to cover those. And then the business model makes sense. That's a stupid way to run business.
It is a stupid way to run business. And if you take a cue from some of the most successful companies in the world outside of cybersecurity, if you look at what they've done with their marketing and advertising and PR campaigns over the years, it's all about attracting the consumer in a way that makes them feel good, right? It's not about, hey, I solved this very complicated problem for you. It's something that makes them feel good about what they're doing. And we are significantly missing that in cybersecurity. It's a different field, and I understand it's technical, but there is definitely a chasm between the buyer of technology products, including cybersecurity, and the people who are building it. Except if you look at, from those companies that shall not be named with, sunsetting their actual devices so they can't work after 12 to 18 months that we talked about in an earlier segment, they're still all about the buyer, not about the product.
We see this longevity thing though. Like, this is the difference between InfoSec companies, I believe, and a lot of these long-standing companies. You look at something like Koch brothers or many of the companies that have been around almost 100 years, and the way that they've had to pivot, the way they've had to do business and establish relationships, build supply chains, build out relational business models. They have to do this in a very traditional model, and they have to do and pivot often. InfoSec, we are very short-lived and we're very new to the business realm, yet we think we own everything and have this perfect solution for making a lot of money, which there's a lot of money, but that doesn't mean it's the right way to run business for a longevity standpoint.
In case you can't tell, Joe, this is exactly why Adrian wanted to pop up a PLG conversation.
Yeah, right. Well, I think we have time for maybe one more article. And I don't think that I would be able to do this episode justice without bringing up the Twilio breach. That seems to literally keep on getting bigger. I think that this was an interesting supply chain attack, at least in my opinion, because it seems like, these attackers kind of knew what companies that they were trying to attack down the chain and where the weak link was in Twilio, to be able to do this spear phishing attack that led to, Okta accounts getting breached and DoorDash accounts getting breached. I think the last time that I read on this breach, 176 customers were affected, and Twilio, of course, claims only 176, but it's affecting, probably tens of thousands, if not maybe, 100,000 users, right? Like, so the impact is a lot more broad than what they're actually claiming. Any thoughts on that?
I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. Like, honestly, I feel like this story is not putting on enough tinfoil hat. There's not enough tinfoil for this particular hat. The timing of this supply chain attack, the very precise nature of the hit in combination with certain Authy users, and then you add the interesting coincidence of the LogMeIn breach for LastPass, and I really think there was some very strategic data that someone needed some smoke and mirrors and top cover for in order to gain something for a mission and op, the next iteration of the supply chain. And this is just I think this is going to end up being a SolarWinds eventually if the data ever fully gets realized. There's a lot of stuff not being said. There's a lot of stuff not public yet, and there's a lot of stuff that will eventually come out as far as what's ongoing. But I think people need to look at this from a bigger picture view, from not only the politics happening and the worldview, geopolitical things, but also what vendors were hit and at what points in time. Those are very critical things that I think eventually will come to light.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I wonder, what the broader impact will be in the next 6 to 12 months, right? Like, what the attackers are actually going to be doing with this information that they got, and how they're going to use this to create more attacks off of it. It'll be it's interesting, at least to me, of what will come.
Yeah. So my take on this particular one is this is only the beginning as well, kind of similar to what T-Rob had to say. I think what's really interesting about this is that it's targeting APIs and it's targeting infrastructure that other systems use. This is essentially a software supply chain hack, basically, is what it is, of massive proportions. And as we continue to build our new systems and applications on top of third-party APIs and third-party offerings, we will only see more opportunities for these style of attacks to continue to propagate through the world. So I think this kind of fundamental infrastructure style attack will be the future of mass breaches as we move forward.
Katie, any thoughts on it?
Nothing beyond what they've all said. It's going to get bigger, and I was just reading 2 or 3 articles on why API security is super important earlier today. So, yeah, everything they said.
Awesome. Well, with that, thanks so much, Tyler Shields, for joining me today.
Absolutely. Pleasure to hang out with you for a little bit today, Joe.
Absolutely. And thanks, Katie, as well, for joining.
Of course. Always happy to.
And finally, thanks, Tyler Robinson, for joining us today as well.
Absolutely, man. Glad to be here and appreciate you taking over on the host side of this. This was really well done.
Yeah, absolutely. And a big thanks to everyone watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. And Adrian will be back, not next week, I believe, but 2 weeks, right? Because of Labor Day. Or maybe I'm mixing up my holidays. Awesome. Well, with that, bye, everyone.